Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome into our virtual fair in Austin. We are all in different places, but through an unfortunate series of events, we weren't able to gather in person this year for Austin, which is a bummer because we always usually have a good time there. But we do have our Austin local, Julia Rogers, who's with us tonight, who's going to be walking us through an amazing presentation on gap years, planning, all the questions that you may have. And we have a very special set of resources for you tonight, including a virtual, basically guide to all of the programs that you would have seen in person. So I'm Anna El-Hood with Go Overseas, and I'm here with my colleague Jory, who's also from Go Overseas. And of course, we're here with Julia Rogers from Enroute Counseling. And we are going to be here talking with you tonight about all of the opportunities and, of course, questions that you may have about what to do after graduation and especially on gap year. So, without any further ado, let's jump into the presentation. Thank you, Julia. All right, everybody. So, as I mentioned, I'm Anna Al-Hood. I'm the Partnerships and Outreach Specialist here at Go Overseas. Like all of our team at Go Overseas, we have a very special connection with gap time, with travel, and especially with intentional time that you set to learn skills, to build yourself, and to also just explore the world. So my time was in Buenos Aires. I learned Spanish. I started working in Latin America, and it's led me down a really beautiful path that now has me here with you all, helping high school students and their families connect to intentional gap times. We also have Jory, our amazing content and community manager, who's on the call with us tonight. I'm going to let Jory introduce herself for just a bit. Go ahead, Jory.
Hey everyone, I'm coming to you from Bend, Oregon. And like Anna said, we are very sad we weren't able to meet you all in person, but very glad that your safety was prioritized and hope that you all weathered that crazy ice storm at home and cozy. But we are really glad that we can join you now and you're in for a great webinar today. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jory. Yes, we're sending you guys all sunshine for the rest of the year. No more snow, no more snow, unless it's cozy. Tonight, we're also sending you some tips and resources that you can use for after the webinar and especially to help with any gap time planning that you may be doing. The first is our guide that we'll be sending you a virtual version of during this webinar. I'll be putting it in the chat as well as in the QR code section of these presentation. We also have a gap matcher quiz that would be really awesome for you guys to check out. This is basically a personalized quiz that, based on your answers, your interests, your goals, and your strengths, it matches you with a few of our programs on gooverseas.com that could be best suited for what you're looking for right now. Obviously, this is a list of suggestions, not mandatory, but we found that it really helps people kind of whittle down their options to the ones that feel best. And as always, we have gooverseas.com, which we highly suggest you go to see more than 17,000 different programs that you could be looking at. So yes, what is gooverseas.com? Just as a little overview, we are like the Yelp of meaningful travel experiences, right? So if you are thinking to yourself, hey, maybe I want to do something a little bit more unconventional, I want to go learn a skill somewhere or have a very unique intentional experience, we specialize in that. So, if you're looking at gap year, maybe you're looking at high school abroad, study abroad, teaching English abroad, language schools, internships, right? Adventure. No matter what you can think of, we probably have it on our site. We also have more than 300,000 global members on our site, over 60,000 verified reviews and photos from programs. We update this constantly, so you're always getting new, fresh insights into what's available and out there from the people that have lived it. We have more than 2,000 articles and guides for your own kind of self-service. And we love to give away scholarships. We will be talking about two scholarships tonight. So if you're interested in free money, stay tuned. So, as I mentioned, this gap matcher is very important and it often helps students just kind of gain their footing a little bit and what could be interesting for them. So, I really recommend you scan this QR code, save it on your phone for later if you don't want to do it now, but it's a really good resource that maybe could help you take the next step. And thank you, Jory, so much for linking our 2026 Gap and Global Opportunities Guide in the chat. You'll be seeing more of that as well as a QR code, but definitely take a look at that because Julia will also be referencing that throughout the presentation. And now for that free money. We are giving away, as we do every year, our annual $5,000 scholarship. So essentially, if you are planning to enroll in a program that is eligible for this $5,000 scholarship, and you can see that in the guide as well, basically you will win this giant check that translates to actual money that goes towards your tuition or program costs of the program that you choose. Scan this QR code to learn more. It is absolutely free to enter and, of course, free to win. And we wish you guys the best of luck. And thank you, Joy. The link's in there as well in the chat. Eligibility, right? Who can actually enter this? It's free, but you have to be between 17 to 20 years old at the age of applying. That's the most important part. You have to be planning to go on a participating program in 2026. You'll be able to see that marked as well in the link, and you can always email us if you have any questions. You have to have attended an in-person or virtual USA Gap Year Fair. You can check that off because you're here. Make sure you note it in the form. And you have to be planning to enroll in an eligible program, right? So planning to go on a participating program and planning to enroll. Scan that QR code, enter. Worst case, you don't win. Best case, you do win, right? So take that chance. It's worth it. Just like Hannah. Hannah took that chance and Hannah won our scholarship last year. She just did her gap year with Timberline Canadian Alpine Academy, where she became a certified ski instructor and had incredible experiences with students from all over the world, also becoming ski instructors. She has loved it. She has loved it. It's one of the best decisions she said she's made. And we're hoping to kind of pass that on and pay it forward to the next person who's looking to go on their gap year too. So make sure to apply. We also have another giveaway for you guys because we wanted to be in person so bad, but we can do it here virtually. You can enter to win a free flight. We're giving away a $500 flight voucher to anywhere in the world. All you have to do is scan the code on screen to enter. This is also free to enter. And if you invite your friends and family to come to the fair, you earn extra entries for every person who attends. Very low risk, very high reward potentially. And who doesn't want a $500 free flight somewhere? I definitely do. And as I mentioned before, we have our guide to global learning opportunities. This is a really, really good resource for you guys to kind of go through. Not only does this guide give you opportunities to look through programs that you could be doing, whether they be summer or longer term, but they also give you a little bit of insight into gap year counselors that you could be talking with, such as Julia. You'll learn more from Julia tonight about how she actually approaches designing gap time for her clients. But there's just a lot of information there that if you take it at your own pace, it could be really, really helpful just in general. And we have no more in-person events, unfortunately. We finished our last event in Seattle last week, but we would love to have you for our upcoming virtual Gap Year Fair 101s, where we talk with gap year counselors to basically help decode the process of picking a gap time and seeing what's out there. So if you'd like, please scan that schedule, register for any of our upcoming fairs. We have one at the end of this month as well as in March, and we'd love to have you there. And before I pass it over to Julia, all of us here, we just want to emphasize how important it is that you're here, right? I know this was just a matter of logging onto your computer or into your phone, but it's a really important step in maybe actually being in one of these places in the near future, right? We don't do anything unless we get more information, unless we feel confident and capable to do it. So you being here, maybe you're having a little snack, maybe you're in your bedroom, who knows? But even though you're comfortable, you're thinking about taking a next uncomfortable step, and it could be fun. So as you look at these programs here, this is just a little representation of some of our top programs, but there's so much out there. And we're really, really lucky to have Julia here with us, kind of walking us through and seeing how exciting and also intentional that can be. So without any further ado, I'd like you all to welcome Julia Rogers to the stage.
the very comfortable stage of my office. Thank you so much, Anna, and welcome everybody. I'm so sad that I wasn't able to be in Austin. And as a Vermonter, I'm based in Vermont. The when I first saw the forecast, I didn't think it was going to be much. And then when it became like a snowmageddon, ice storm fiasco, I was very glad that everybody, made those more conservative choices of like staying home and staying safe. And I managed to thread the needle and get back to Vermont from Chicago without any incident either. So it ended up all good. But just a little bit about who I am and why I'm here. Many people don't recognize that there are gap year counselors. We are a very niche specialty, but I think that I have one of the best jobs in the world because I work with students all over the country who choose to take a gap time and want some support and assistance, both logistically and emotionally, to get them, to craft this really personalized itinerary that's really going to make their gap year purposeful and intentional. And that's really my goal as a counselor and a mentor. I've been a gap year counselor for basically my whole career. I took my own gap year into Tanzania and spent almost a year there doing public health work as a volunteer. And when I came home from that, I said, wow, I wish I had done that before college. That would have changed so much about my college experience. And that really got me excited about the concept of ushering young people through the process of planning a pre-college or during college gap year, which is primarily the types of students that I work with now. I also am got my fingers in many pies in the gap year space. I'm very involved in the Gap Year Association, and I also hold a professional accreditation through them. And I co-host the podcast Gap Year Radio, which is actually starting its 10th season on Monday. So definitely tune in. You can find it anywhere you find your podcasts. And the opening episode is actually going to be an interview with a student named Arjun, and he traveled to 100 countries before he turned 18. And he did about over 80 of them during his gap year between the ages of 17 and 18. It's a really, really fun conversation, so inspiring. And the way that he traveled was absolutely diabolically outrageous. And it's so fun to listen to and get tips from, even if none of you plan on traveling to 80 countries on your gap year. So anyway, I think all this is to say is that I live and breathe this information. And one of the best things about gap time is that it looks different for absolutely everybody. So what I'm hoping to do tonight with all of you guys is help you debunk a question that comes up towards the end of senior year when all the people in your life are starting to ask you these questions about what comes next. What do you want to do with your life? This question is so loaded. And I think it's unfair to ask young people what they want to do with the rest of their life when they're still trying to figure out what to do next, like what to do in the next 6 months to a year. And a gap year really offers young people this longer runway to ask themselves some big philosophical questions about their values, who they are, what they want to, who they want to be in the world as an adult, and how they want to gain that independence as an adult. But it also allows the time and space to pursue activities and opportunities that will help you make those decisions. So it's a real twofold type of opportunity that allows you to step away from this big, really intense question and allows you to kind of ask smaller but very important questions about who you want to become as you step into adulthood, this first kind of step as a rite of passage. So I want to give us a anchor point to what a gap year actually is. Everybody comes to this option from a different place. Some people have friends or family who've done gap time or an older sibling. Other people may have heard about this through Go Overseas is Amazing Marketing and were gap year curious. Or maybe there are some students watching that their parents were like, maybe you should take a gap year. And so you're here. But the definition of a gap year is pretty simple. It's just an intentional period of time devoted to personal growth and supported by experiential learning opportunities. So what that means is that you're usually learning outside the classroom, you're doing things in the real world, you're choosing what you do, and then it's intentional. It's not something that just happens to you. So that's a really distinct part of this definition. So if you know somebody who graduated high school and then just kind of existed, but didn't make a intentional choice about what they're doing after high school, that's not a gap year. That's something else entirely. A gap year is really where we spend time on these 3 Ps: personal, practical, and professional development. If you can think of a couple things to do in each of these categories to anchor yourself to your gap time, you will have a really purposeful and amazing year. The personal stuff is going to be things that pertain to your hobbies, your interests, things that you just want to do for your own enrichment. The practical is going to be things that you need to do to gain life skills to be functional as an adult in the world. And the professional stuff is going to be things that you can do that to help explore potential career paths or academic paths. So all of those things kind of can combine to form a really well-rounded gap year experience. So I want to help paint the picture tonight of what gap time can look like through giving you some student stories. And this is Elsa's. And Elsa came to me through her father. Her father is British, and it's very, very common in the UK and other places in Europe and Australia and New Zealand and Israel and many places to take a gap year. And we are in North America are just starting to embrace this option and just starting to popularize it. But Elsa's father knew that this is something that has been going on for decades and decades in the UK. And he's like, Elsa, you should do a gap year. And she was a little hesitant, but she agreed to have a phone call with me. And we walked through her interest areas and what she could imagine doing if she did take a gap year. And she ended up getting really excited because Elsa was a very hard worker, really, really pushed herself in high school and was kind of entering the last part of senior year pretty burnt out, which I think is common for a lot of high achieving students. And so she had already gotten into college. She could defer her admission, and she decided to take a year where she was going to spend it exploring her own personal growth and really kind of diving into interest areas that she didn't have time for during her high school experience with all the other things that were on her plate. So she started her gap year after working for a summer after high school graduation. She went off to Nepal with an experiential semester program where she was hiking in the Himalayas and staying in rural homestays and learning how to stone carve, which is this picture from a professional stone carver during an apprenticeship with him. And basically had this incredible cultural experience with a group of peers that were also on her program. Then she came home for the holidays. And when she went back out after the holidays, she decided to go to Costa Rica and do an outdoor expedition program where she was gaining all sorts of outdoor certifications. So she got a wilderness first responder, which is a wilderness medicine course certification. She learned how to abseil. She got her swiftwater rescue certification while whitewater rafting. She was rock climbing and scuba diving and surfing, all really cool things. And so she really wanted to beef up that skill side of her portfolio, if you will. And then she ended her gap year with a bunch of travel and conservation volunteering in Australia and New Zealand. And that was a little bit more independent, where she was kind of designing a couple weeks of travel and like surf camp and stuff, and then a couple weeks of conservation volunteering independently. So that is a pretty amazing gap year. It's not everybody's gap year, but it was Elsa's. And Elsa actually inspired her brother. I just talked to her brother yesterday, actually, who's planning on taking a gap year. And his gap year is going to look extremely different than Elsa's because he's a very different person. But that's kind of the beauty of it. He saw her have this amazing year, and now he's kind of embracing what it could look like for him. So well done, Elsa, inspiring us all. So besides the actual young people and the people in your life who may be able to show you what a gap year could look like and what the benefits are from them anecdotally, we also have a good amount of data to show what the gap year outcomes are and what the benefits can be for young people kind of collectively. One of the most powerful pieces of evidence we have is a student survey that was done a couple of years ago. And what that student survey found is, in this big letters, 95% of the survey respondents say that their gap year helped set them up well or very well for their next step after their gap time. And these were students, there was over 3,000 people surveyed in this survey, and they were going to four-year colleges, community colleges, workforce, military. They were doing all sorts of different things after their gap time, but they almost universally felt better prepared for that next step. And that's a pretty incredible outcome when we think about how young people are feeling very unsure in the face of the future of not only, the world, but also just the future of our economy with the rise of AI and other types of uncertainty. We also found that students have really high outcomes in socio-emotional learning. So 98% of them said they developed the ability to interact with people of different cultures and backgrounds. And I think that if anything right now, we need to develop empathy and compassion and ability to look beyond differences and find common ground. I think that's an amazing skill to learn. It's not something that you have to cultivate through just international experiences. You can cultivate those skills locally in your own community or in your own state as well. 98% say they gained maturity and confidence as a result of their gap year too. And I would say that if we had a word cloud of the reviews and surveys that I do with my students at the end of their year, I think that the biggest outcome that I hear from my students is confidence. And you can't underestimate how powerful that can be to come into college feeling like you know who you are, you know why you're there, it's just such an amazing feeling for these young people to really be able to embrace their next steps fully. A lot of students also feel, 82% of this surveyed, say they feel a competitive job advantage or competitive advantage in the job market as a result of their gap year. And this can be as a result of doing things like jobs or internships, which is really popular to do on a gap year. But it's also because after a gap year, all that confidence and maturity really shows up. It shows up in how people present personally in interviews and their verbal communication, their leadership skills. These are all things that really set gap year students apart. So sometimes I hear students say that they're hesitant about taking a gap year because they feel like they're going to be left behind or older than their peers or things like that. And when I talk to my students after their gap time or a year or two into college, they always say they feel ahead because they felt like they were more ready for college when they started. And they also felt like they were more able to interact with people of all ages. So they were meeting their fellow freshmen and feeling connected with them. And they were also able to connect with upperclassmen because they just felt more at ease in their own skin. So I think that all of this is to say is that a lot of the data that we do have about gap years shows some very, very compelling evidence that it's very, very beneficial in many ways. And we got the little arrow there. So I want to just spend a moment talking about who takes a gap year, because I think that, again, we get in our heads that gap year is for a certain type of student, and it's true that there are different reasons for taking gap time, and that can mean that you do different things on your gap year and that you therefore have different outcomes from your gap time. So I'm going to give you a little overview in the spirit of Stranger Things, which I know is like almost out of the zeitgeist. When I created this thing 2 months ago, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so relevant. And now I'm like, now I need to redo this for Bridgerton or something like that. But we're going to keep with Stranger Things and go for it. But first of all, we have a profile of a student called the worker. So Nancy from Stranger Things. You don't need to have watched Stranger Things to understand this analogy, but our worker is kind of like Elsa, high achieving, high performing, and high risk for burnout. So this type of student would take a gap year to recharge, to explore their interests, and to really embrace what their identity is outside of the classroom, because a lot of students tie their academic achievement to their identity in this profile. And so it's really an opportunity for them to say, I'm a whole person outside of my academic achievements, and that allows them to really feel reset before they start college. We also have the meaning seeker, Robin. So these types of students are very bright. Their GPA doesn't always match their potential because they really have to want to do something. Sometimes these types of students are also neurodiverse, ADHD, autism spectrum, that kind of thing, but sometimes not. Sometimes they just need to be motivated by wanting to do it. And so sometimes traditional school environments have not been super endearing to these types of learners, but what a gap year offers them is choice. They get all the choice they want of what they can do. So they end up going towards their interests and really delving into things that inspire them, that motivate them. And you would not believe how much success students like this can have on a gap year when they get to choose what they do. And the cool thing about this too is that they also gain perspective. So if a student really gets to dig into an interest area on their gap year, and they know that in order to do that for the long term, they're going to need a certain type of education, they're much more motivated to succeed in that type of education because they understand the reason for it. And that's the reason of things is a really important motivator for this type of learner. So next we have our floater, Steve. This is a student who just has never really thrived in the formal classroom setting. And sometimes they also need to mature, to build skills. These are the types of students that if you just kind of airdrop them in the middle of a college campus, they would not be ready to thrive right away. So this is a type of student who's going to need a little bit more maybe supportive programming to help them build those skills, to get ready for whatever post-secondary education is going to be, looking like for them. And they're also going to, it's important for those types of students to also develop an internal motivation as well. So just figuring out what they want out of life and to start getting excited and prepared for it. Then we have our pragmatist. So pragmatists are very motivated to attend post-secondary education. So they know they want to go to college, they want to get a degree, sometimes they even know what for, but they also know that they are on the hook for the cost of higher education, either partially or fully. So they really want to know for sure what their academic path is going to look like, or at least have a little bit more clarity so they can make very pragmatic decisions on which college they go to, which program they're joining, what their major is, etc. So a lot of times these kinds of students want to focus on career and professional development on their gap year. So they might do a series of internships, they might do some job shadowing, informational interviews, and combine that with other kind of types of experiential programming to kind of come out the other end with a lot more clarity about what they're wanting to use college for. Then we have our adventurer. So this is the type of student who just wants to take a bite out of the world, who has very itchy feet, who may not, if you just stuck them into the college setting right away, they might feel a little restless because they just want to do and see a lot. They sometimes have a passion project or something that they really want to tackle. They sometimes want to tackle really independent travel experiences. So Arjun, who I interviewed for my podcast, perfect classic presentation of an adventurer, for example. So those types of students are really going to be able to kind of latch on to those adventures and get that out of their system a little bit and kind of develop a little bit more so that when they start their post-secondary journey, it's a little bit more settled and they kind of have a little bit more focus. And then lastly, we have our soul searcher 11. So a lot of times our soul searchers have had difficult high school experiences for varying reasons. They may have had mental health challenges. They may have had physical health challenges. They may have just had a really disjointed or difficult high school experience. And so a gap year is like this reset time. It's an opportunity for them to engage in wellness activities or opportunities that really build them back up so that when they do start that next step, they feel really well and ready and just, built up to their best potential. So what we see here is that if you're thinking about the people in your life, you can probably Venn diagram it to look like most of the people kind of can fall in one or more of these categories, right? And that's to say that a gap year can really serve just about every type of person for different reasons. So maybe you see yourself in one of these profiles or maybe a few of them, and that just helps give us a little bit of anchoring to what you might want to do on a gap year or how a gap year is going to serve you. Speaking of which, there are so many things you can do on a gap year. It's very exciting. And sometimes for families, it can also be a little overwhelming. So this slide is not meant to overwhelm you. It's meant to show you the possibilities. And then we'll talk a little bit later about how to bring that field of possibilities into a more manageable set of options. But first of all, it's, I think, best to understand gap year opportunities in these two broad categories. There's things you sign up for that are programs, and there's things that you make happen yourself, which are self-designed opportunities. So firstly, we have programs, and these are a lot of things that are at the Gap Year Fair, and I'm going to talk about at the end of this session, so you have a little concept of some of the programs that would have been at the fair. With experiential semesters, for example, these are going to be programs that are typically set length, so usually somewhere between 6, 8, 10, or 12 weeks long. They run typically on the fall and the spring semester, and they're group-based programs that are themed around a certain type of learning or experience. So they can range from a language learning semester in Europe to a really rugged outdoor experience in Chilean Patagonia to a travel and cultural and adventure travel-based experience in Southeast Asia. They really can run the gamut. Some are place-based, meaning you stay more or less in one location, and others are travel-based, meaning that you move around with your group. But the common denominator is that they are very well mentored. There's group leaders and facilitators on these types of programs, and they're really amazing for personal growth and development. And the social experience is really, really awesome too. Some of these programs also offer college credit, which means that you can access your 529 college savings money to pay for them if you so choose. So that's another opportunity that some of these programs can offer. On the volunteering side of things, there are so many ways to give back to communities, both close to home and away from home. But in the programmatic category, these are going to be, residential type volunteer experiences where you go and stay somewhere and then serve a community. There are all sorts of things you can do in the conservation sphere. So picture is someone helping with coral replanting while also scuba diving, which is very cool. There's also all sorts of ecological projects, replanting trees, field research and surveys where you can help with scientific research. There's also work with animals at animal rehabilitation centers where you can help wildlife be rehabbed and released. Domestic shelters where you can work with dogs and cats who are in shelter settings. Lots of cool stuff on the conservation side. On the human-based side, a very common human-based volunteer experience is to work as an assistant teaching instructor. So if you have like English teaching, sports coaching, other types of topics depending on your skill set. I've had students do drama teaching too, things like that. So that can be a really cool way to live in a local community and share a skill and help uplift a community. And there's also other types of volunteer work that you can do in community development work, working for nonprofits, working for mission-based organizations, that type of thing. a lot of times volunteering, when you're being hosted in a community, you're typically paying into that experience, but you also get in return room and board is typically included in these experiences. You can usually choose your length of stay. There's usually like a minimum 2, 4, 6 weeks, depending on the type of experience, and you can stay for up to sometimes 12 weeks or longer if you want to. And you're typically, like I said, paying into that experience, but it ranges how much you pay on a volunteer experience. So just know that if you're paying to volunteer, you're not actually paying to volunteer. You're paying for the infrastructure that keeps you well trained and well fed, and people who are minding your safety and that kind of thing. Then we have enrichment courses, and there are so many enrichment courses, it would take all night to go through all the different things you could do on a gap year, but the most common things in this kind of category are things that you could do for your own just personal growth and development. So things along the lines of like learning a different medium in the art world. So going and taking an art class in Florence, Italy, or learning a language, like going to a language school in Costa Rica and learning Spanish. There's also things like outdoor development courses where you can go and get a certification in a certain type of rock climbing or belaying. You can take coding courses or other types of computer science courses. So they're typically experiential courses, not necessarily college courses as we would traditionally see them, but sometimes students do use them for sussing out career paths and things like that. Other times they just want to do it because it's a cool activity. Then we have national service. So this is AmeriCorps. And unfortunately, AmeriCorps funding is it's not widely available at the moment. So we don't have as many AmeriCorps options as usual, but typically we see a couple different types of programs that students are eligible for as gap year students. And these are cool because they are fully funded experiences that are paid through the federal government. And so you would do things like trail building, or I have a student who's on an AmeriCorps program right now who's actually helping people with their taxes. So there's a combination of human-based work as well as conservation work on these programs. Last, we have interning. And a lot of times we think of interning as, oh, my mom's buddy is an attorney and I can get her coffee at the office and kind of see what's happening with attorneys. But gap year internship programs are a whole nother level. These are programs that are actually structured to give people industry level experience in areas that they're already interested in. So if you think you're interested in journalism, or you think you're interested in public health or commercial real estate, there are gap year programs that can actually match you into internships where you get to go and live in an apartment with other gap year students. And then every day you kind of go off to your own internship experience. It's an amazing way to test drive a potential career path and confirm or deny if you like that or not. And there's internship programs here in the States as well as abroad. So those are typically 2 to 3 months long, sometimes longer. And yeah, it's a really cool experience to kind of nurture your professional development. Next, we have travel and other self-designed experiences. So travel is kind of your typical put on a backpack and maybe see a little bit of Europe and do the trains and that kind of thing. It can also be taking a road trip to visit friends at college if you're here in the States. Or it could be like Owen, who's on a camel in front of the pyramids. It really depends on what you want to do. But a lot of times students do work in some independent travel on their gap year. Also, local opportunities. I know I'm talking a lot about far-flung places, but most of my students will spend part of their gap time closer to home, earning some money, and just kind of like kind of getting back to basics a little bit and building that skill set that way. So thinking about local volunteer options, local interning, local work, that is a good thing to do for part or all of gap time, as long as you're pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and into new areas. Then there's destination work, and that just means earning money somewhere else. So you can work at ski resorts, you can work at resorts that offer employee housing, you can work in national parks. You can even work abroad and get working holiday visas in places like Australia or New Zealand or Canada. So that is a really great opportunity if you need to earn some money for part of your or all of your gap year and you want to be away. So very cool opportunities in that category too. And then we have personal projects. Personal project can really run the gamut. If I've had students who've written books of poetry or their own plays. I've had students who've done projects on cars and motorcycles and things like that. So if there's something that you really want to do and you just need to set some time away to do that, a gap year is a really good time to do that. And then lastly, work exchange. This is woofing, workaway, these types of exchange programs where they're platform based, but you're looking for actually individual hosts in different places that were willing to house you and feed you in exchange for labor. And this, I can't find a way to describe this type of opportunity without it sounding super suspect, but I guarantee you they are some amazing hosts out there. I myself have woofed and done workaways all over the world. I know that some of my colleagues on the call have also done all sorts of types of work exchange. And it's an amazing way to have a cultural experience, to travel less expensively. And yeah, this picture is actually from a Costa Rica farm that I stayed at a couple of years ago. So really cool opportunities abound in that category as well. So now that you're sufficiently inspired, let's talk a little bit about Julian, give another example. So Julian did a half and half gap year. He worked for half his gap year locally, and then he traveled for roughly half of his gap year too. So the first half of his gap year, he worked at a gourmet cheese shop in his hometown. And he said that it was actually quite hard because he didn't work with anybody his own age, but he developed a lot of people skills, good customer service, a lot of confidence. And he also earned money that he then put towards the second half of his gap year, which was in Europe. He spent 6 weeks at a really cool design internship program in London. And then he traveled for 6 weeks on a program with other gap year students where they traveled to, I think, 7 different countries in Europe over the course of 6 weeks. So he's a great example of somebody who had that really important kind of skin in the game type of paid work opportunity, and then was able to leverage that into some really cool travel experiences too. And he's at Parsons right now. So that design internship in London was very relevant for his studies as well. So let's talk a little bit about the elements to go into how to plan a gap year. I think that the first things first is the parameters. And what this basically means is that you sit down as a family with all the stakeholders that are important and really start to lay out what could this gap year look like, and what are the things that me as a student or me as a parent really care about in this process. And the idea is that, especially for parents, you want to create the boundaries of the gap year. You want to kind of say, are there hard stops geographically or budget, or things that you think you would and wouldn't support? It's really important to try and set that groundwork before the real planning actually begins, because then a student can feel more freedom in choosing what they want to do. Because a good gap year really comes from an empowered student who's making those choices for themselves. But obviously we want to do that within reason. So that's why you kind of have this conversation and lay that groundwork. That alongside that conversation comes this conversation of geography. Where could you go? And it's, obviously it could expand worldwide, and sometimes it does, but you can also think about who you know in other places. So I have a lot of students who will sometimes be like, oh yeah, I have an aunt who lives in New York City, or I have a cousin who just had a baby. She needs an au pair or a nanny for a little while. Sometimes if you think about the geography of your network, it can unlock all sorts of interesting experiences and opportunities for your gapper. So thinking about geography, not just of where you want to go, but also who you might know in different places. We also want to think about progression. So this basically means that a gap year does not have to be the same thing for the same amount of time throughout the year. Most students are going to start with an experience that's a little bit more structured or supported, whatever their starting point is, and then move into experiences that are more independent, sometimes less expensive, or just are progressive in some other way. So they might be more challenging or more physically interesting, or further away from home. So whatever that progression is for that student, you're adding an extra challenge as the year goes on. And that's what really makes gap years such an amazing growth experience. And then we have our goals. So this is where we really start the planning process, is thinking through, brainstorming those 3 Ps: personal, practical, professional. And once you have, basically 3 to 5 things in each of those categories, then you can go and start looking for programs and opportunities, because you know what you're looking for. You don't need to go down a rabbit hole of like looking for Mandarin language programs if you've done the gap year exercise and figured out like actually that you want to learn Spanish or Russian or something like that. So coming from a place of goal setting makes the process a little bit more linear when you're looking for opportunities. Okay, let's talk money. This is always when I'm at the fairs in person, parents are always want to know, how much is this all going to cost, and what is the ROI of a gap year? So as with everything, we're going to start with every family has a different financial picture and has a different amount to invest in a gap year. I always want to talk about a gap year as an investment because it is. It's an investment in all ways. It's an investment in time, of energy, of resources, and of course, financially, it can be an investment too. But with that language of investment is the understanding that on the other side, you're getting something out of it. So whatever a family is able to invest in a good gap year, an intentionally planned gap year, they will often see on the other side a more prepared student, a more confident young person, a person who's really excited and more optimistic about their future, which is, I think, a really good investment. So it's important to understand the expenses associated with taking a gap year. So this can include program fees, flights, vaccinations. I've learned over the years that rabies vaccines are not covered under insurance. And it's been very rare that a student has needed a rabies vaccine because of an animal incident, but some programs actually require rabies vaccines if you're working with bats or with street dogs and stuff like that. So you want to budget for that kind of stuff. Then you also want to think about the resources at your disposal. And this can be layered, right? We think about family contribution, not just a parent, but sometimes grandparents or other extended family come into the picture. We also want to think about the student having skin in the game and contributing, and how much is that going to be and how could that look? So that's a great conversation to have, again, at the beginning of planning. Are 529 funds available, and do you want to spend money on them? I had students who have a lot of college savings money, and they're pretty confident that they don't want to use that for a 4-year school, or that it makes sense for them to leverage that money into a gap year program, and that can be a great way to pay for some programs. Next, we have fundraising. If you're going to be volunteering or doing something else worthwhile in that vein on your gap time, you can often fundraise for it. Or another way of thinking about it is that sometimes students will set up kind of like a fund for their graduation money, and they'll funnel all of their graduation money into their gap year, and that kind of helps their family and friends know where their money is going. And then programs and places like Go Overseas and the Gap Year Association, many of these places also run scholarships, and there's financial aid available at many, many gap year programs. If you find a gap year program that you absolutely love and you're having a hard time figuring out how to pay for it, reach out to them directly and ask what the options are, because a lot of these programs would love to have an enthusiastic student that really wants to be there, and they will try to make it happen if they can. When we plan for progression in the financial aspect of a gap year, we're planning for the fact that different parts of the gap year might cost different amounts of money. So we're not going to get, if you invest in a more expensive program at the front part of your gap year, maybe you're doing a working piece of your gap year later, or a less expensive piece of your gap year. And then lastly, there's plenty of low-cost opportunities to consider. So think expansively about the types of things that could be appropriate for the gapper in mind. Things like, we've already mentioned many of these, but grassroots volunteering, that's really where you go to like a small source, directly volunteering with an NGO. AmeriCorps Work Exchange, au pairing, which is nannying, destination work, independent travel, and personal projects. Those all fall under these very affordable, low cost, or cost positive types of opportunities. So there's many ways to make a gap year work. I just want to also highlight my poster child for the affordable gap year, Michelle. Michelle self-funded her whole gap year, meaning that her parents were supportive of the idea of a gap year and said, you and Julia are in charge of making this work with the money that you have. So Michelle had started saving early, and then she also participated in more affordable opportunities that worked for her budget. So she spent the first part of her gap year working over the summer, and then she went to Guatemala for 3 months and worked and just learned Spanish at a small language school, came home for the holidays, and then when she went back in the second half of her year, she interned at a really cool women's microfinance nonprofit in Oaxaca, Mexico, had an amazing experience there, and then ended her year with some solo travel, backpacking through Colombia and Peru. So, she kind of did a lot of these things ahead of time. She was researching travel grants. She was being mindful of the types of programs that she was choosing, and she had this amazing year. So she's a great example of what can be done with on a budget. All right. So when we think about the timeline for planning a gap year, if we have people who are juniors or younger in the room, that's really where you're thinking just broadly about a gap year, getting excited by the concept. Senior year is where you start scheming, where you start thinking about like, how is this going to fit into the college plan? Or am I applying to college senior year, or am I waiting? And then right now we're in the planning phase. So if you are a senior in high school and you're thinking about a gap year, now's the time to kind of like go all in and start planning it. So you have that longer amount of time to really choose intentionally what you're going to do with your year. And then summer after graduation, before your gap year, is really the time for preparation, for getting your vaccines, for getting your gear together, all that stuff. And then you're on your way. So when you think about the college planning piece of this, there are two options. I would say that if you can make a good choice about what college you want to go to, it is easier to apply senior year and then ask for deferral from your school of choice. If for whatever reason you're not prepared to apply senior year or don't want to, or just don't feel like you can make a good choice by springtime, of course you can apply on your gap year. And it doesn't look bad to colleges as long as you're using your time wisely. In fact, it can often look good. But you just want to make sure that you're minding all the deadlines and the pieces and puzzles of your college application process while you're on your gap year. It's kind of nice not to worry about that, but it's definitely doable. You also want to check with your school and make sure that you're following all of their procedures for making a deferral. So typically when you defer from a college, you put down a deposit and then you request a deferral in the form of usually a letter or a proposal about what you're doing with your gap year. And then they rubber stamp it, hold your spot for a year, you're golden. When it comes to the money part of it, sometimes financial aid and merit packages and those kinds of things will defer along with your admission. Sometimes they won't. So you have to ask case by case and figure out what your school's policies are around that. And with FAFSA, you will apply again, or you'll put in your money, put in your information while you're on your gap year and then get another package that will be credited, for your actual start to freshman year. So just keeping an eye on those kinds of things and understanding if you're trying to get credit or if you accidentally get credit on your gap year, that can be, your college might get a little bit bristly about that. So you really want to understand all the rules around your deferral too. Oh my gosh. All right. So I wanted to take a couple minutes and actually talk through the programs that would have been at the fair. So I'm going to just unshare my screen for a second and pull up the Airtable and give you a little taste of the amazing programs that you can research on your own, but sometimes it's helpful to kind of know what they're all about. So I'm going to reshare here and bring up the Airtable. So this is that you will all have access to this exact website with all of this great information. Obviously, I'm on the left-hand side here, but Adventure EXP, they are a destination work program, really, really cool organization where they will help you with the job hunt, with placing you with a company that offers employee housing, and they work seasonally. So you can work fall, winter, spring, summer, or any one of those types of seasons. So that's a really great opportunity if you're thinking about doing some work on your gap year, you want to be away from home, but you also need some support in making it happen. Barrage Programs is amazing for artists. This is a program that is in Normandy, France, and you live in community with other creatives, and depending on the session that they do, sometimes they are traveling a little bit more around France, other times they're staying at the chateau and doing all sorts of creative projects, and they have different tracks for things like filmmaking, creative writing, music, performing arts, photography, all sorts of things. So that's really, really good for the art students. Then we have CIEE. CIEE is a really great language program. So they run a bunch of different language sessions in different countries. So Sevilla, Spain, Kyoto, Japan, they change it up every year, but they are a very well-established language school program. And they run on semesters. So if you want to do a full semester language immersion, that's a really good thing to consider. Then we have Dynamy. So Dynamy is an internship program. They're based in Worcester, Massachusetts. And this is like one of those programs I was describing before where they do a matching process and they can help find a really specific internship opportunity for you based on your profile and what your resume and what you're interested in. And they run on the semester or the full year. So you can do one or both of the fall and spring sessions. Then we have Europe Gap Year, and Europe Gap Year is based in Ireland and Scotland. And again, depending on the session that you do, they offer a few different programs, but one of their programs is called the Celtic Catalyst Program, and that one focuses a bit more on entrepreneurship, but you're also traveling in Scotland and Ireland. They also have a couple European-based programs where you're traveling around Europe proper, and they have some adventure travel built in along the way. So if you're interested in kind of those northern climates, that can be a really good one to look into. Then we have Gap Guru. Gap Guru is a volunteer-based program. They go to Central America, Caribbean, South America, and they have different offerings for both group-based and individualized volunteer experiences. Scrolling down, then we have HMI, High Mountain Institute, on the left-hand side here. They have some amazing outdoor education semesters programs. So if you are a rock climber, If you're an outdoors person, they have a Southwest semester, and they also have a program that spends time in the Southwest and Chile. So really cool programs there, but also semester-based programming. Then we have Irish Gap Year. So Irish Gap Year, based in Ireland, they have some really great programs around adventure and leadership. They have a semester in adventure and leadership. They also have an arts and culture semester, a little bit similar to Barrage, but with the, kind of Irish twist, where you're doing different types of art workshops week by week. And then it culminates in this awesome kind of art show where all the students are working on a show of their own, which is really cool. And they also have an internship semester too, which is based in Bundoran, Ireland, which is kind of on the northwest coast. Really cool program as well. These are all really cool programs. I love all of these programs. Okay, so then we have Knowles. Many people are familiar with Knowles. They've been around for a very long time, as is the Outward Bound program that's next to them. So Knowles is a outdoor leadership school. They run shorter and longer term programs. So think 2 to 4 week programs in the summer months, and then I would say 4 to 10-week, 12-week programs in the gap year timeframe of like fall and spring. They have semester programs, they have month-long programs, and they go all over the place. So you could go again to Patagonia, you can go to their home base in Wyoming. They have a really cool Rocky Mountain leadership semester. Many of their programs also include wilderness medicine courses like wilderness first responder or wilderness first aid. So very cool, long established program. And Outward Bound is similarly illustrious. Outward Bound has been around for 50 or 60 years. Amazing outdoor education programs. They have some really cool multi-location programs. So they have a program where you can go to Maine and North Carolina and the Florida Keys all in one semester. They have another one where you spend time in Panama and Costa Rica. So they, have some really great domestic options. Oh, they have a really cool one where you can go dog sledding in the boundary waters of Minnesota in the wintertime. So cool. So lots of really great, anywhere between 10 days and 55-day programming from them. Pacific Discovery. This is another kind of I would say buffet type of experience where all of their programs are multifaceted. So they spend time in one region, but you're doing different things in that region. So for example, they're based in New Zealand, and they have a New Zealand, Australia semester where you do a bunch of different conservation, volunteering, and outdoor adventure projects in both of those countries over the course of 10 weeks. But they also go to Central America, South America, Southeast Asia, and Polynesia as well. Then we have Rooted Life Adventures. Rooted Life Adventures is a really cool option for students who need a little bit more support. They have a little bit more of a clinically informed program. So if you're feeling like you want someone if you're someone who really wants to build out your life skills, who wants a little bit more mentorship, they run some really great programming in New Zealand and Australia as well. They have an Australia program that's a month long and a New Zealand program that's 3 months long on the fall and spring sessions. Then we have Semester, and this is great for any of those salty sailors or would-be's because Semester has these amazing semester-long programs where you would learn how to sail a tall ship with your crewmates, and you also do a bunch of marine conservation and marine biology stuff on the boat. So you're learning leadership, you're learning curriculum around marine biology, all sorts of really cool stuff, and their programs are usually 10 weeks long as well. Okay, then we have Spanish Gap Year. So Spanish Gap Year, as the name implies, runs in Spain. They have a couple different programs, but their whole thing is around really authentic, Spanish immersion travel run by a Spaniard named Arancha. She's amazing. And they do spend time in Barcelona on their entrepreneurship semester where you actually get to intern and do some startup work if you're interested in entrepreneurship and startups. That's a really cool program. Then we have the Gap at Sawmill Meadow. If you're looking for a faith-based program, this is a really cool one. It's run by a very nice family out of South Fork, Colorado, and they're a really kind of like heart-centered program that's around life skills while, honoring that faith-based aspect. Then we have Universidad Carlos III de Madrid. This one is a Madrid-based university, but they have an English language arm. And so you can actually take English language courses and Spanish courses combined. So this would be great if you just want to be in a city and want to kind of do a bunch of different enrichment activities, but also be like focusing on your Spanish acquisition. Warriors Academy is in South Africa. This is for the sports kids, the kids who want to be active, who want to push themselves, who want to do a bunch of different activities and explore South Africa. This is a family-run program. And you, depending on the time of year, there are so many different activities that you can do with them. Very, very cool program. Where There Be Dragons, again, a one that's kind of an industry stalwart, has been around for a long time, and they specialize in highly authentic, rugged travel. So, for example, on their Indonesia program, you actually live with sea gypsies, which is what they call themselves. And you also get to go and stay in really, really remote locations and off the beaten path places. It's very, very cool. And they run semester programs that are 10 to 12 weeks long. And then lastly, we have world-class programs, which is a great option if you are still in high school and you want a kind of a taste of a gap year. World-class programs are language and cultural programs that run during the summer months and are particularly meant for high school students and people that are just graduated. So that's a really good option to look into if you're looking to kind of start your gap year in the summertime, or if you want to have a mini gap or a summer gap and you're still in high school. Okay, how did I do, girls?
Crush it as always. That was wonderful, Julia. Thanks so much for taking us through the full list. A little bit of a mouthful for you, I'm sure, but
I know, but it's actually like it's a good test of my knowledge.
Yes.
And so hopefully that was not too overwhelming for everyone to hear those little tidbits. But I just felt so bad that there's like everybody, they wanted to be there with you guys, you know. And I know that we're probably going to take a couple questions with our time, but I just want to also share my screen real quick of my just contact info and stuff while we chat. But these are all some great resources for everybody to kind of take in. I'm very easy to find both on social media as well as through my email. And I know that my Airtable has all my information there too. So with that, Jory, I'll kick it back to you. I know that I chatted a lot, so I'm sorry if we don't have a ton of time for questions, but I'm happy to stay a little bit longer if we need to.
no, all good, Julia. I think we can definitely afford a few extra minutes if people have questions. And thank you again for taking us through that full Airtable there. Like Julia pointed out, there are a lot of really amazing programs and opportunities and a wide range of them. So feel free to poke through that guide while we're chatting through. I just have two questions here. The first one is, do students plan their entire year out all at once, or can they sign up for a 4 month program and then choose to do an internship after or a work program? Or maybe I just want to extend the program that I'm enrolled in for those first 4 months.
This is
So, yeah.
such a great like question, because I think it comes at there's a natural kind of tension in the gap year planning process where you want to make good choices, but you also want to leave room for flexibility. And so my general rule of thumb is that you want to stay like a season ahead of your plans, because you don't want to accidentally box yourself out of an opportunity that has application deadlines. So my rule of thumb is that when I'm working with students, I want them to have the first half of their year planned out by graduation. So that means like in June, I want you to know what you're doing from June through the end of the calendar year. But then maybe you're just penciling in the second half of the year. And if you're considering opportunities that have shorter runways for signing up, like volunteer experiences or courses and things like that, often you can sign up with it a month or two to spare. That's fine to wait a little bit longer and see how you're feeling after your first experience. But if you want to do an internship or work-based program, you need to give those 3 to 4 months or more lead time so that they can process your application, find the right match, and that kind of thing. So you do need to kind of stay a little bit ahead of your decision making.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Julia.
Yeah.
Right now, we just have one more question. This is a really good time to get questions answered live. So please feel free to pop any in the QA chat right now. But one more question for now. Do you have any gap years for kiddos before high school?
So like as in they're still in high school, is that how we're interpreting that?
Yeah, so modifying that question, I'm interpreting it as, are there any program opportunities for students that have not graduated yet?
Yes. So there are increasingly just students who have different needs or desires or whatever for their gap time. I work with a lot of students who graduate early from high school, so they're 17, but they're technically graduated from high school. So that's one bucket of that category. But if you're a high school student and you're like, I need out of here, there are a lot of exchange programs. So you want to maybe look into things along the same lines as Rotary, where there's an exchange with a like a foreign exchange student type of thing, and you can often do those for a full semester or a full year. And then there's also a network called the Semester School Network, and that's a really cool network of programs that offer high school semesters domestically or abroad that are really experiential, very cool, and are really worth looking at if you're thinking about like a semester or a year away as a high schooler.
Awesome. And Kate, thank you for the question. She actually just edited her question a little bit. So they're asking about programs for eighth graders in particular, if you have any suggestions there
I
or
love the fact that you're
opportunities.
thinking about a gap year for an eighth grader. So usually for kids that young, you're thinking of like that's more, I would say, like almost like a sabbatical type of thing where you might be going to some place. I'll just use an example. I was in Costa Rica in the fall, and there was a place called the Cloud Forest School in Monteverde, and that's a place where you can actually enroll as a student for a certain amount of time. But it's not a boarding school, so you'd probably be there as a family and just like going to school in a different location. That's probably the most common thing for someone who's that young to do, aside from some sort of boarding school type of situation, which is probably not what you're looking for. But yeah, I would say it's mostly family experiences until they're in high school.
Awesome. And Kate, if you have any other follow-up questions on that, I definitely encourage you to reach out to Julia directly. She would be very happy to provide some insight for your specific situation. And then we just have one last question here, and I think we'll end it at that. So this question is, when do most gap year students apply for college?
Yeah, so this question has changed over the years. Before the pandemic, I would say that probably 90% of the students I work with had applied to college and then were planning to defer. And I think that has changed a lot with just people needing a little bit more information about themselves to make a good decision about where they want to go to college. I'll also stop my share so we can all see each other for this last question. So my philosophy on this is that if you feel like you can make a good decision about where you want to go to school, apply senior year. You have more resources. You have your school counselor, your peers are doing it. So you're just going to feel a little bit more supported in that experience. But also, if you don't get around to, if you don't get around to it senior year and you are applying during your gap year, there's a lot of ways to make that process a little bit easier on yourself, like making sure that before you leave school, you get teacher recommendations while they still remember you, and you make sure to let your counselors know that you're applying to college on your gap year. So definitely possible. I would say if you're in a position to apply senior year, you should do that.
Wonderful. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording, but thank you everyone again for joining us. This has been a really wonderful session. Julia, it's amazing to have you as always. I'm going to
Thank
also
you so
pass it
much.
off to Anna to close out with any final words here.
Yeah.